So today we're in Birmingham, Alabama at the Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument. A special thank you to the National Park Foundation for their collaboration on this project. So can you tell us where we are and who our guest is?
We are standing in Birmingham Civil Rights Institute, and I am so pleased to introduce you to someone I learn from every single day, Mr. Barry McNeely.
Barry, thank you so much for having us here today. Now, I'm not going to say you look tired, but from what I understand, you're also a social studies or a history teacher.
I'm a history teacher locally. I teach advanced placement United States history at Parker High School, and I'm a history professor at the University of Alabama at Birmingham.
So you are busy, and then you came here because you do work here also.
I'm the historic content expert for the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute.
Well, then you're the right person for the job. Can you tell us a little bit about this site?
The Birmingham Civil Rights Institute is the place that memorializes the struggle of the human rights and the civil rights movement from the 50s and 60s, and it stands as a place where we can learn from those lessons to chart our future.
So what do people do when they come here?
Well, it depends on your level of interest. The average person that will come here will go through the permanent exhibition, which starts in 1921 and it works its way to present day. And it takes you through a multimedia exhibition that tells the story of the development of the civil rights movement and the high points of the movement that culminated with the 1963 Children's March here in Birmingham. Your more academic or more interested visitors, authors, researchers, and people of that nature can also visit our archives, where we have a large amount of material stored from this narrative, and they can reserve time and come and visit that, and they can also learn from our voluminous oral history program, where we have sat down people who were actually here in Birmingham in the 1950s and 60s, and we've taken their stories down and transcribed them. So there's quite a bit here to find.
Why did you want to work here?
I wanted to work here because I love history. I wanted to work here because my aunt was one of the 5,600 children that were arrested and treated like criminals to make the life possible that I live today. And so just to give back.
So it's your interest, and then it's, like you said, it's personal to you. So you are now telling the story, you're interpreting the story. So basically you're kind of like a ranger, a park ranger. You're telling the story here for others to see. If there were one story here that you would want to tell us, can you think of one that you could share with us?
I want to tell you about Reverend Fred Lee Shuttlesworth. In so many ways, he is the most courageous man that I've ever studied. Fred Shuttlesworth in 1961, when the Freedom Riders came to Birmingham, they were assaulted by the local Ku Klux Klan. And the Commissioner of Public Safety allowed this to happen. When it happened, Fred Shuttlesworth intervened and took those Freedom Riders to get medical attention. And after they received medical attention, he took those 6 white students and 7 black students to Bethel Baptist Church that you referenced earlier, breaking the law, because at that time it was illegal for a white person to enter a black church. But he took them there and he let them stand and testify to the community what they were doing and why they were so committed to ending segregation. Bull Connor comes to the church and threatens to arrest him, and Fred Shuttlesworth tells Bull Connor, "You're not arresting anybody today." And he turns around and he walks into the doors of Bethel Baptist Church, and Bull Connor didn't arrest anybody that day.
Barry, as a history teacher, as a historian, what is the main purpose of that job?
The main purpose of a historian is to chronicle the past so that people in the present have a way forward, a map, so to speak. History is a way of divining what we should do and what we should not do. Those things that have happened in our past happen presently because we really haven't examined them as much as we really need to.
I love the idea that you're here because you love history and you're a teacher, but that it also told us about the connection that you had here. Are there any other stories you can share with us to sort of highlight why this place is needed?
Well, when we think of the people of the city of Birmingham, Alabama, and we think of the narrative that the Birmingham Civil Rights Institute and the Birmingham Civil Rights National Monument tries to expose people to, it's a narrative of a group of ordinary people who lived through extraordinary times. And those extraordinary times led them to a conclusion that at no point was guaranteed. They had no reason in the city of Birmingham to believe that they could change segregation, that they could bring about equality. This system was so entrenched in Birmingham. And with a leader like Bull Connor from 1937 to 1963, being in power and stating that he didn't care about the Constitution because we have our own law in Birmingham. It was almost like living in a third world country for the marginalized people in this city. And so again, they had absolutely no reason to believe that they would be successful. But that's the powerful thing about faith.
So I love that you said that ordinary people took this on. Like, this is what they were experiencing. Are there any ordinary stories of these people?
Mary means monk. In Birmingham, Alabama, there was an ordinance that provided housing. Now, the housing in Birmingham was 43% of Birmingham's black community were relegated to live in 11% of the residential territory. And so 43 and 11 don't quite go together very well. And so there wasn't a lot of decent housing for the black community. And there were areas that were reserved for white people to live in, but they weren't living there. So Mary Means Monk sues the city of Birmingham to overturn the housing ordinance. And when she wins this case, she moves into her home, and 3 days later, her home is bombed. She repairs the house because she wasn't killed, but she also wasn't intimidated. Then her house was bombed again. But Mary Means Monk, being Mary Means Monk, she wasn't going anywhere. And she repaired that house a second time. It didn't stop them from bombing her house again. Her house was one of many houses that were bombed repeatedly over a period of 2 decades. In fact, there were more than 50 unsolved bombings in that neighborhood where Mary Means Monk lived. So many bombings that they came to call that area Dynamite Hill.
What a sad story of our history, of people treating each other as subhuman. We taught to our students that we want to be good humans, that everyone needs to work towards being a good human, being kind, understanding civil discourse, saying, I don't really understand what you're saying and I don't agree with you, but I love you, brother, because we're humans, right? Mm-hmm. I think these stories will be inspiring to our students who are growing up now thinking, it's up to me. I'm the one that needs to speak for those who are not able to speak for themselves. Do you have any advice for our students that are digging into this history, ever how scary it can be for kids? What would you say to kids that are trying to learn about this now?
I would say to them, first of all, it is a scary history. But it's important to understand that courage is impossible without fear. And the people in this city exhibited a grace and a courage that makes it inspirational for all Americans to see what they were able to withstand through their values, through their commitment and their ideals that overturned violence and bluster. They believed in peace and love. In fact, Reverend Fred Shuttlesworth, the organization he led, the Alabama Christian Movement for Human Rights, the motto of that organization was, "We shall not harm one hair on a white man's head." If you can believe in love and forgiveness and understanding, you can pretty much do anything.
You can change the world.
Exactly.
So I read that John F. Kennedy said in a speech, "But for Birmingham." Can you tell me what that means?
Well, there's a book about the Reverend Fred Lee Shuttlesworth, and it's entitled "But for Birmingham." And when John F. Kennedy calls for the access bill, that today, in retrospect, we call it the Civil Rights Act. When he called for that, he intoned Birmingham because it was the courage of the young people here. It was the determination of the adults here. It was the leadership of people like Joseph Lowery and Fred Shuttlesworth, and of course Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, that provided this staunch example and this urgency of the moment. Because people had been kicking the can down the road. Of course, Dwight Eisenhower, he signed the Civil Rights Act in 1957, and before that, the Supreme Court had ruled in Brown versus Board in 54. But these changes were very, very slow in coming, and Birmingham created such a crisis that either the nation would move forward or it would be caught in a morass. And as Dr. King asked us, where do we go from here? Chaos or community? Birmingham answered that question. And so that's why Kennedy said, "But for Birmingham, these changes that we have today wouldn't be here."
So I want to issue a challenge to our kids. Barry talked about kicking the can. So what are you going to do? When you see things that are unjust in your school or in your community, are you going to kick the can, or are you going to speak out? Are you going to be those people like the heroes we're learning about today that speak out in nonviolent ways, saying, you know what, we need to change, we need to do better. We had these voices, these prominent voices, but now they're gone. What are your voices going to say? Are you going to pick up the torch? Are you going to carry on this movement of love and kindness and understanding and being, as we always say, good humans? I hope you do. I know Barry would like to see that too. He is here working to share the stories, but we know there's stories in your own community. So how are you going to stand up and stand out from everyone else to make sure that people are doing the right thing and that we're loving one another? Thank you so much for sharing. I can't wait to learn more about this place.
Thank you.